So, he's here. With his myriad of talents, an author, a producer, the founder of UNIFYD. And how many do we have now? Over 200 in the world?
265.
265. Let's give him a nice welcome and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, cool. So first of all, thank you everybody for being here. And thank you for putting this whole thing together and opening up a center and making this happen. I think that's really the most important part, because I play the role of, I don't really know, I play a lot of roles, but I play the role of, the speaker, the face, making everything come into action and work. But without Kathy, this wouldn't be possible. Without all the center owners around the world that are stepping up, hearing the call to actions and saying, let's do it, let's make it happen, none of this would be possible. So let's just give her a hand. So before we begin today, we got about 2 hours together, and throughout the next 2 hours, I'm going to speak a little bit, I'm going to teach a little bit, I'm going to share a little bit. But the most important part is I really want to go into questions, and those questions can be about anything. So that means that we'll speak about the technology, how this whole thing works, and I'm going to give you guys an in-depth understanding as to how this works in a grounded way, right? So most of us are not quantum physicists, myself included, so I had to figure out a way to translate the hard words and the hard concepts into easy things to understand, to a point where we can basically explain it to kids. Because we're all kids sitting in this room when it comes to understanding this level of science, most of us probably. So we're going through a learning process right now. We're going through a process of understanding what is this and how is it that this helps us so much, because it's not the technology that's healing you, it's your body that heals itself. It's the technology that provides really the proper environment for your body to do just that. So I'm going to ask you all a few questions, just answer by a raise of hands so I can read the room a little bit and understand who I'm speaking to, and that will dictate what I say next. So number one, who has watched the interview with Dr. Sandra Rose Michael, the original one? Okay, mostly everybody in the room. Who knows what TLS is if I speak about TLS? Also mostly everybody in the room. Great. So I'll touch up a little bit for those of you who don't know that. Everybody that knows about UNIFYD Healing, raise your hand. Okay, we're doing good here. And UNIFYD TV, how many of you know what that is? Now, keep your hand up if you're a member. Okay, everybody in this room gets 10% off if they are UNIFYD TV members at any center on this network, just to put that out there so you guys understand how this whole thing works. And I want to explain the model of what this works according to, and then we're going to go into understanding how this technology really works in a grounded way with some really cool things along the way. So let's rewind for a second. 13 months ago, April of 2022, I was about a year and change. Yeah, a year. We just had our 2-year anniversary of UNIFYD, which was on May 5th of this year. So May 5th of 2021 is when this whole thing started, believe it or not, which is crazy because of how much progress was made in a short period of time. Now, I want to make something really apparent. I could not have done that by myself. The UNIFYD team could not have done that by themselves. Center owners like Kathy could not have done this by herself. This is a collective effort. And this is a collective effort from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. That's why it's grown so big over the past year specifically since UNIFYD Healing launched. Not because of big investors, not because of a billionaire with good intentions that may have turned bad over time. That's usually what happens. Not because of big donors. That's not how any of this happened. This happened because everybody stood up, heard a call to action, and said we're ready to do it. Now, it's not enough just to say let's do something, because I know that many of you have been around here on this planet for a lot longer than I have. And many of you have probably been trying to make a change for a very long time. So what happened 12 months ago that changed everything as we know. And it wasn't me as Jason, and it wasn't Dr. Michael as Sandra, and it wasn't an individual center owner. It was a combination of all of it coming together. It was a combination of that coupled with every center owner that said, I want to do this, combined with every person that said, I want to try this. Because none of this would be successful without every single one of those pieces moving together simultaneously. So back in April of 2022, I decided to put together a summit. It was a virtual summit called The Shift on UNIFYD TV. And I brought some cool leaders and speakers and doctors from basically all around the world to share on this summit. It was a summit opened virtually, of course, to the entire world while it was live streamed. And a friend of mine, Scott McKay, otherwise known as the Patriot Street Fighter. Scott McKay was one of the hosts of this shift. I brought him on. And he was interviewing Ty and Charlene Bollinger, all about the truth about cancer and the truth about vaccines and everything that was going on there. And throughout this interview, he brought up this technology, the energy enhancement system, Dr. Sandra Rose Michael, and my family, specifically my father and my mother, they were both watching this interview. They said, what's this technology? You know, what's going on? I said, I don't know, I've never heard about it, never spoke to this doctor, never heard of her. My dad goes, can you put me in touch with Scott? And I'll get in touch with her. I said, cool. Now my dad's in the alternative space by desire, not by work. My family's in real estate. My dad runs the whole company. And basically, just what he does as a hobby on the side is helps people because he's very, very educated in the alternative healing space, which isn't alternative. It's just alternative because we've created something corrupt. So we call the source alternative, but it's not. It's actually what everything is based off of, meaning you can't patent something that occurs naturally in nature. So because of that law, because of that rule, because of how it's built, Big Pharma and their corporations and that industry as a whole will not go and say, hey, we've scientifically proven that an apple is good for a cold, because they can't sell that apple with a patent for a period of time. So what they do is they take a piece of nature, like Advil, that comes from the willow bark tree. They create a synthetic version of it, because when you synthesize something and you add a few chemicals to it, thus rendering it not straight from nature, you can patent that thing. And then you have 20 years of an exclusive on that patent before people can start making generic versions of that very thing. That's the structure that we're working with right now, which is why the corruption exists in the way that it does, because it's built in that way. That's literally what it's going to render, because nobody's going to go and spend billions of dollars on clinical studies if they can't be an exclusive selling that thing or find a model that makes sense financially speaking. So it's like an inherent corruption in the system to begin with that's caused everything to happen in the way that it does, which is the system that we're experiencing right now all around the world. So my family says, who's this doctor? What's this technology? They get in touch with Scott. They get in touch with Dr. Michael. They start talking to her, and my dad is really intrigued. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Turns out my aunt had a 12.5 centimeter cystic fibroid in her uterus. And of course, doctors were telling her you have to do X, Y, and Z, and all these crazy things that we would have done as a last resort, but not if that's like our last choice. We'll try everything else before we do what they were referring to, which is surgery, and in some cases even things like chemo, things like that. You don't know if it's cancerous or not, or whatever it may be. So we decided to send her to the Verona location, Jeffrey Lewis, 24-unit system, which is the same as this right here. And we sent her there for kind of, let's try it, we have nothing to lose. 4 hours in that system, it was gone. And I'm looking, my dad's looking, and everybody's like, what the hell just happened? We don't know how that just happened. So now, being that my background comes from a more physical place, I've always had that like spiritual essence and component, like most of us in this room, if not all of us in this room. But I always needed more evidence, something to show me that there's something more to this than the placebo effect and the power of thought and subjectivity, but there's an objective impact going on. So I had yet to believe, once that happened to my aunt, that objective truth was there. So I started going deeper. I said, this is interesting. I want to understand a little more of what I'm seeing here. So I started going deeper, asking some questions, doing a little bit of research. And honestly, I was very tired at the time, so I just kicked back and I said, I'll get to it later. A few days after that whole thing happened with my aunt, my sister's dog, small little toy poodle, 6 to 8 pounds, cutest thing in the world, had a 4-centimeter cyst grow on his neck. We said, well, just send him to the system. Let's see what happens. So we sent him to the same system in Verona, New Jersey, one of only 18 or 19 centers at the time around the world. It was only 13 months ago. And my aunt slept with him in the system for 3 nights in a row, 8 to 10 hours each time. Do you do overnights here?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So 8 to 10 hours each time. 3 days later, the cyst was gone. The cyst was just dissolved. And that's when I just put my hands up and I said, listen, there's something going on here it's beyond my comprehension. Because if it's happening to animals, it takes the placebo effect out of it, at least in my eyes. Right? There's something going on here that I don't understand, that it started piquing my interest more and more and more and more. So I saw that happen. I saw what happened to my aunt. And I heard testimonials of a few other people, not many, but a few other people around the world. And I said, okay, that's interesting. Let me speak with this doctor. So I asked Scott, my parents, because they were already in touch with her, I said, put me in touch with Dr. Michael. I get on a call with her. She starts telling me about this technology and how it's been around since 1996, maybe 27 years before this moment of what we're sitting here now. And I'm thinking, I'm like, why, if it's so great, why hasn't it taken off? Maybe the right person wasn't behind it. Maybe the right voice wasn't behind it. Maybe we needed the right place and the right time, which COVID brought that time, to have people start asking more questions. So basically, on this phone call with Dr. Michael, she's telling me all about this technology. And she's like, by the way, this is like 25 minutes in. By the way, your people who you work with, which is TLS, which I'll explain for those who don't understand briefly in a second, they approached me back in July of 2011. Now, for somebody to say that, and for that to be true, is a very, 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 very big deal. For those of you who don't know what TLS is, just like there are negative organizations out there doing things for, negative intent, not really for the people, but for themselves with their own agendas, there's the exact opposite. And that's obvious, by the way. We just haven't heard of them for a very long time. How many of you know really big organizations like the Freemasons, like the CIA, that are good? Oh, does that mean that they don't exist? No, it just means that because of the law of harmony and balance, they must exist. It's a law. Forget about opinion. Now we're just getting to the point where certain people, and many of us, are starting to become more and more aware of them. And by the way, we got to ask ourselves, why now and not 20 years ago? Well, number one, if you pay attention to the difference between the dark organizations and organizations of light, if you want to call it that. Organizations that are good understand the Savior complex and the Messiah complex and all that. There's a reason why they're not coming out as all the other organizations on the other side are. Because imagine you could identify and put an identity to people that are taking hundreds of thousands of children out of underground tunnels. Imagine you could put an identity to the specific people that are doing incredible things. You'd call it almost like the second coming of Jesus. That's what would happen here. And that can't happen. Because the whole point of the Messiah complex is to reverse it. To understand what people like Jesus, what people like all spiritual and religious leaders wanted us to really understand. Because the whole I am your Lord and Savior, there's another sentence that nobody speaks about, which is I am you and you are me. So if I am you and you are me, we redefine the word I. And when we redefine the word I from I am you and you are me, then I am your Lord and Savior can be translated to you are your Lord and Savior. We're moving out of the paradigm of giving your power to people that you look up to because they've done incredible things. And we're moving into the paradigm of all of us looking up to people and saying, wow, that person just showed me what I'm capable of. That's the point of where we're moving out. So TLS is a very powerful organization. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar operation with everything, like every resource that they need to do what they need to do at their fingertips. And by the way, their money comes from businesses that they run around the world. It could be big hotel chains that all of you know about. They have one very big headquarters in New York City. It could be big technology companies. Anything that's a legitimate company that they're using the funds for, instead of making somebody very rich and buying $1 billion yacht, let's use the money for positive purposes, for all, to give back in order to continue receiving and to receive in order to continue giving. That's the idea of how an organization like TLS works. So when Dr. Michael said to me, by the way, they approached me back in 2011, that week already I had a lot of people emailing me telling me the same thing. So I didn't believe him. I said, okay, whatever, it's another one. I'm just going to keep moving forward. But there was something different in the way that she said it. And I decided to go a little deeper and let's see what's going on here. It just felt different. So I made a call to certain people who I work with in the organization. Mind you, this organization is behind the scenes. It's undercover. A lot of the people that work there, some of which you know, by the way, very powerful people in the world that just do double lives. They work in the public realm in which you know them, and then they work behind the scenes to do things with the agenda of the organization, which is how do we make this world a better place? How do we assist humanity in reaching a higher level of consciousness? Because you don't fix a problem by throwing $1 billion at it. You fix a problem by changing the consciousness that caused that problem in the first place. So that's the idea over here of how they work versus how the other side would work. So I made a call, and they were laughing at me. It was, who knows Ray? Raise your hand if you know him. Ray is like the person that I speak to directly, who's like a mentor for me in the organization. So Ray and a few other people who I spoke to in the organization, and I said, what's going on here? They laughed at me and they said, just keep going. I'm like, what do you mean just keep going? They're like, she's telling you the truth, keep going. I said, okay, I don't really know what that means, but I'll keep going. And they said, we want you to interview her. And I said, okay, I'll set up a Zoom. They said, no, not a Zoom call. You need to go meet her, and you need to go and interview her. Now I'm looking, and I'm saying, if they're coming and intervening, which they usually don't do, if they're coming and intervening and giving direct guidance on go do X, Y, and Z next, there's a really good reason for it. Because an organization like that will not guide you to do something without a very, very good reason for it. Because they don't like intervening with that natural process of things happening. So I said, okay, I'll interview her, give me some time. I just moved to Miami. I moved from New York. It was like a fresh start to my life. I wanted to meet new people, make new friends, and just, start. So I just wanted to relax. They didn't really let me relax. They still didn't let me relax. I'm still not relaxing, but this is my life. This is my life. So basically, they gave me a three-pronged task. They said, you have to find a way to make the world aware of this technology, find a way to make it affordable, find a way to make it accessible. Awareness, affordability, accessibility. I had to figure out how to do that in one shot. Kill 3 birds with 1 stone. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do that. They said, you're going to interview her. And I said, okay, but how far is an interview really going to go? It's an interview. I've done many interviews. They said, just go. And I kept pushing it off. And they pretty much, they put me on a plane. They sent me to Vegas. They put me in a hotel. Brought my dad along the way for the ride because he was pretty much the one that started this with his curiosity without even knowing it. And I said, let's go. We'll make a trip out of it. Father, son, we're going to Vegas. Okay. I bring my cameras in my backpack. No film crew, no camera crew, no nothing. My own cameras, my own tripods, my microphones. And I said, let's just do it. I'm doing it out of respect to the organization because of how much they've done for me already. I'll get it done. I'll fulfill what they're asking me to do, and I'll move on. Or so I thought. It didn't happen that way. So, just a second. So we're in Vegas. I interview her in her home. She thought I was coming for a fundraiser. She saw me pull out my cameras. I said, listen, just sit down and answer some questions. And they, just to give you guys in-depth details here, they even gave me certain things to bring up in that interview to, I guess, ensure success in the way that they knew that I did it. All the way to certain words that they wanted me to use. They said, you need to use the word miracle as much as you can, and you need to get her to use the word miracle as much as you can. Figure it out. That was right, but okay. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I figure it out. And there was a few other pointers that they gave, and they said do X, Y, and Z. And if you look in the interview, I had a script in front of me. That script was a guidance of certain questions in a certain form that I was helped with. That wasn't, me coming up with all of it. I came up with a base, and they helped me change it. And they said, go. I'm just giving you guys the details that most people don't know. And they said, go for it, go do it. So I sat down with her for an hour. This was on May 21st or 22nd, something like that. And I interviewed her. It lasted for about an hour and a few minutes. Finished it, did the edits myself on my computer that same day. I had the final version. I said, okay, we're putting it out. The date was to put it out May 27th. That was a Friday. Almost a 1-year anniversary, by the way. May 27th, 12 p.m. Eastern time, this interview comes out. I don't know what happened, how it happened. I still don't get it. But 70,000 emails came in to Dr. Michael's team the next day from that interview specifically. And I'm looking like, what is going on? Now, I knew it was going to be big because they're involved. I just didn't know. Can everybody hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. I just didn't know how big it would be, and I didn't know what was about to happen next. So their team is like very happy but freaking out at the same time. Her son, the CEO, Michael, called. He said, Jason, what'd you do? I don't know what to do. There's too much coming at me. I'm like, listen, this is not my doing. This is not me. I was just used as a vehicle to do something. So it was like funny and crazy and a bunch of things all at the same time. So the interview comes out, 70,000 emails later, they don't know what to do. They literally needed to fly in family members just to help them until they built up their team to a big team that they're still building every single day now because it hasn't stopped. It's a tsunami of awareness that keeps on going and going and going. So I'm sitting there over the next few days, and I'm just like, okay, what's next? This can't be where it ends. With what just happened, there's something next that I knew that I needed to do, I just didn't know what it was. A few days later, I'm sitting at dinner, and a friend of mine says something. I don't even remember what he said. But one word that came out of this guy's mouth, by the way, ended up getting cancer and reversing that cancer with this. It was a crazy story. But that one word that came out of his mouth just sparked this vision, this like download. It like that, like in a second. And there was no thought, there was no rationale, there was no reason behind it. It was just like reason as in thinking. It just flowed, and I couldn't sleep that night. I think it was a week later, that following Friday night, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm sitting there, and I couldn't sleep. And I'm like, if I can't sleep, there's a good reason for it. Let me just write down everything. So I started writing down everything that was flowing through, and started formulating exactly what we're doing here today, and what's going on, and why so many centers are now around the world and really experiencing it and going through it. The idea was this. All these centers want to open, and that's great. But with a technology that nobody's ever heard of, with a technology that works in a way that's already difficult for people to comprehend because it's so different, we need proper awareness behind this thing. And without the proper awareness behind this thing, we stand no chance. So then I'm thinking, who's going to do it? And then I understood. And I said, well, it dawned on me that there's nothing to build here. It's already built. That was the divine timing that we experienced because Unified TV and Unified Social at the time, and the organization as a whole, we had so much traffic and so many users and so many eyeballs. Instead of trying to build something from the ground up, we already have the people looking, just show them where to look. So that's where Unified Healing came in. We said, let's build a network that already has the eyeballs behind it and bring all our people from here to another bucket to show them where they could be looking and what they could be doing to answer their questions that they've been asking of what's next, what do we do? The medical industry is falling. There needs to be a solution here. And that's when the whole thing just came in. The next morning I called my operations manager, her name is Whitney. She's literally the only reason why I'm alive right now. By the way, never met her. How crazy is that? Never met her. I've been working with her for 2 years, and I've never met her in person. I'm meeting her for the first time next month. We're going to Mexico for a 4-day retreat after 2 years of almost dying every Sunday. So I called Whitney Saturday morning and I said, Whitney, I don't like calling anybody on the weekend, not for work, but there's a really good reason for this. She said, just tell me what you need. And I said, this is the idea. I need you to build a website. This was before we had a huge operation. It was big, but not where it is now. She built a website in about 7 hours. Monday morning it was finalized. Unified Healing was a thing, and we launched it. We said, let's go. We'll start moving everybody over in their awareness from our current base over to that. Ever since then, it's never stopped. It just kept going and going and going, and today we have a big team, and we're running that whole thing. Now, here's the hard part, if all of that wasn't hard yet. Here's the hard part. How do we make people understand this when we can't? It's like, it's so out of the ordinary of what we've been taught when it comes to medicine. It's so out of the ordinary of what we've been taught when it comes to the healing process. So I knew that the only way to do this is, number one, through Unified Healing, doing our best to bring awareness to the centers around the world, but simultaneously using the funds generated from the network, and those funds, by the way, come from people like Kathy, because Kathy has a monthly contribution to Unified Healing. And that monthly contribution ultimately comes from you guys, because you guys are coming to this center and supporting it and supporting yourselves in the process. You give Kathy the opportunity to be a part of something bigger, which then gives us the opportunity to raise awareness collectively around the world, which we've been doing, and it's not an easy process. But through there, it all comes right back to each and every one of you coming to this center. Because what do we all want in this room? Ultimately, we don't just want a good life for ourselves. We want a good life for the world. We don't want a life that you have to depend on a pill that they tell you, take this and you'll be good, that ends up giving you cancer. We want to be able to find that power within ourselves. So the Unified Healing Initiative is built on the same energetic field. And it's not by coincidence, but I didn't mean this when I built it. It kind of just happened. But it happened subconsciously. It's built on the same energetic field that this system creates. And that field is called a torsion field. Torsion field, in other words, is a toroidal field. A toroidal field is almost like this necklace. It's a donut with energy moving in all directions simultaneously. We have a marker here? Nice, we got a whole set. Okay, cool. So, your torsion field is a field of energy that moves in all directions simultaneously. The reason why that's important is because if you understand the significance of this thing, you'll understand how this whole thing works. So I want to segue into understanding the basis of, number one, the big picture of how this works, and then the actual technicalities of how this works. Because when the next person comes to one of you and says, how does this work? You can actually explain it big picture. I don't expect you to remember everything that I'm going to share here today, but big picture you can understand and help that person understand why this isn't a pseudoscience, why this isn't crazy, but how this is actually science. And it's not just science on the 3D level, it's science on the spiritual level as well, on the scalar level. When I use the word spiritual, some people hear that and they hear New Age. When I say spiritual, I'm talking about things faster than the speed of light. That's all. That's how I define spiritual. It's in the field that is outside of the physical, tangible, material realm. That's it. So, let's go big picture for a second. The energy of the environment that you're in is the energy that your body will take on. If you're in a sick environment, and this is the base foundational understanding. If you're in a sick environment, you will take on that energy of toxins, pollution, dirty electricity, radiation, incoherent fields, distorted energy, and that will become a part of you. That's called disease. If you're in a healthy, balanced environment, the exact opposite will occur. Your body will take on the energy of a coherent energetic field, thus rendering your body a coherent field of energy, which is what health and wellness really is. Let's ground that for a second and give you guys examples. If I were to hug you for long enough, our heartbeats would synchronize. What happens when women spend enough time together? Their menstrual cycles synchronize. Why? It's not because it's contagious, we know that. It's because there's a bioresonant field that we are all tuning to around us. And if that resonant field is distorted, we become distorted. If that resonant field is coherent, we become coherent. Disease, health. That's the difference. So the way that this works is, again, by creating, which I'll explain how it does it, a torsion field. A torsion field is a coherent field of energy, which is the base field of all form of creation as we know. Your body, in your birthright, is a torsion field, energetically speaking. All the way to a carrot, to an apple, to a stone, to the planet that we call Earth. The energetic field, I'm going to the energy, not the physical matter for a second. The energetic field of Earth is a torsion field. It goes like that in all directions. Now there's a law in science. That law is called the law of conservation. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. This is a fact, not an opinion. Any scientist, whether they understand this or not, will agree with that. So if energy cannot be created or destroyed, well, something that can't be created or destroyed we call infinite. There's no beginning, there's no end. Nikola Tesla, when he figured that one out, they killed him. And they killed him because when you tap into that field, you solve a lot of problems on this planet for a whole lot of people. But when you solve a lot of problems, in Nikola Tesla's case, it takes a lot of power and money and control away from the people that benefit off of those problems, like metering the use of your electricity. That's free. Electricity is not something that costs money. In the way that we've created it, there are now operational costs with it. But if energy cannot be created or destroyed, then there is an infinite field of energy somewhere. The question is, how do we tap into it? And if you know how to create a toroidal field, or recreate a toroidal field, you are tapping into that vacuum of space, that vacuum of infinite energy. And in that vacuum, in that source of all, is where only health exists. Because dis-ease is not an inherent fundamental part of the universe. Dis-ease is an effect of the causes that we've created, knowingly and unknowingly. And by awareness and through awareness, we'll be able to actually get out of that. So learning how this thing works, which I'm going to explain right now, will show you not just how this works, but how the world is supposed to look. Disease is not just the way it is. That's not how things work. Health is just the way it is. Because beyond duality, there is unison, there is unity. There is one source that everything emerges out of. And the proof for that is energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. So if we tap back into that source of oneness, there is no longer health and disease. There's just health. Because that's what everything's always trying to do. Look into nature and you'll understand everything better. That's what Albert Einstein said. If you cut yourself, you don't have to think about that cut healing. You could actually go to sleep in that cut. You could be in a coma and that cut will continue to heal. Because the body's always trying to do one thing, and that's heal itself. The question is, are you giving it the proper environment to do just that? So, there are three main points that we need to understand here before going into the actual science, both physical and spiritual science, of how this thing works. Number one is electrical charge. Number two is pH. And number three is oxygen levels. All of these are actually the same exact thing, expressed in different ways. In other words, a low electrical charge in your cell will cause for disease. A higher charge causes for health. A low pH causes for disease. We call that an acidic body. A higher pH, a more alkaline pH, renders health. A low level of oxygen in your body renders disease. A higher oxygen level in your body renders health. So let's start with the first one. The first one is your electrical charge on a spectrum of what we call millivolts. 70 to 90 millivolts intracellularly is optimal. 20 and below is disease, cancer. Everywhere in between is approaching disease or approaching health. So what this technology is doing, and again I'm going to explain in a moment, I just want to set the foundation here, is it's actually increasing the intracellular charge of your cells. We're electrical beings, we know that. The higher the charge, the healthier you are. 70 to 90 millivolts is optimal. That's what this is creating right now. 20 and below is not. 20 and below creates disease, creates cancer, creates heart disease, and so on and so forth. Forget about just the physical things. It creates depression, it creates anxiety, it creates stress, and so on and so forth. pH. You have your neutral at about 7 point something, but we'll call it 7. And then anything below is acidic, and anything above is alkaline. Over here is optimal, but you can go into these places as well and be great. Anywhere over here, you experience disease. You experience the opposite of health. Oxygen. Low oxygen levels, we've established, can create cancer. High oxygen levels create the opposite, because an oxygen-rich environment cannot host diseases as we know it. And I'll tell you how we know that so you don't have to count on my word. Dr. Otto Warburg, in the 18 or 1900s, forgot the exact date, won the Nobel Prize for proving the following. Deprive a cell of 35% of its oxygen for 48 hours, and that cell will become cancerous. Low oxygen renders things like cancer and disease. High oxygen renders the opposite. I'm repeating these things on purpose so we remember at least one of them. Because if we remember one of them, all of these are a reflection of the other. Meaning, if you have a high electrical charge, you will be alkaline with high oxygen levels in your body. If you forget this, and you only remember this, if you have a more alkaline or balanced pH, hydrogen potential in your body, you will have a high electrical charge and a high oxygen level in your body. And if you forget this and only remember this, then simple breath work can help you render a more balanced pH and render a higher electrical charge in your body. The point is, if you remember one, you get to all the others because they're all one and the same, expressed differently. So you have 3 engines on this plane to work with. If one goes down, you got another 2 to work with. If 2 goes down, you got another 1 to work with. All 3 can't go down because we have brains and we should use them. All right, so this is the basis of the 3 points of what's important to remember. Electrical intracellular charge in millivolts, pH, the hydrogen potential of your body, and oxygen levels, which low ones on either one of those 3 render sickness, and high ones on any one of those 3 render health. Now the question is, how do we create a torsion field and why is it important? It's important because, as we said in the beginning, be in a balanced environment, a coherent environment, and your body will tune and sync to that. Be in the opposite, and your body will tune and sync to that. Being in an environment of coherent torsion fields will create that health. The way that works is twofold, really. Because what you're seeing here is a computer back here, which Dr. Michael calls an engine field generator, because she creates fields through what we call computers, which I'll explain in a second. That's your black box behind it. And from there, you got your screen. The beauty of what you're looking at here is holistic health is not just a physical thing, holistically. Holistic health is taking all parts of the spectrum into consideration. So what do I mean by that? Right now, we have our spectrum, and we break down according to the speed of light. Anything below the speed of light will go 0, 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed of light, and call it infinity. So anything below the speed of light, we call vector. You don't need to remember this either, I'm just drawing it out so you guys understand. Anything above the speed of light, we call scalar. Other words that can be used to understand those things are, in the spiritual community, fifth dimensional, third dimension. Physical, you can call it non-physical, or I'm going to use the word spiritual now that you guys understand how I'm defining it. So the key over here is not just having holistic health in the entire physical realm. The key is to have holistic health on all dimensions, in both the scalar field and the vector field, in both 5D and 3D, in both the spiritual and the physical, because that's what real health is. Even alternative doctors, they focus on the physical and mix emotions with it. But scalar is your key to bridging the gap, because there is no gap. This is just the speed of our perception. If you take that out, this is part of the same spectrum. So over here, you have a computer behind it, and you have a monitor in front of it. And each one has a role to create coherence in this reality, and to create coherence in this reality, rendering coherence in all realities. You got your computer, your engine field generator, and then you got your screen with a bunch of movement, colors, and lines on it. We're going to start right over here with the engine field generator. To create scalar energy, to access that energy and move into what we experience as a torsion field, you need to do something actually very simple. You need to take two electromagnetic fields that are identical. And when you put them in perfect alignment with each other, a merging point creates a torsion. But this is only based on two electromagnetic fields. If you pay attention to the room that we're sitting in, you have four corners, not two. So the genius of what Dr. Michael created here is not discovering something new, but making something better on top of what we already knew. And instead of just merging two identical electromagnetic fields, in other words, these black engine field generators back here all create an electromagnetic field, and every single one is identical to the one next to it and the one across from it. So now when you have four different points where you create that merge, you now move from a 2-point merge to a 4-point merge, making a much more stable torsion field. A much more stable torsion field will create a much more balanced environment. The best way that I can explain that without using the words electromagnetic field, we'll come back to the screen in just a second, is like this. Let's say you have two cars that are both traveling against each other, and they weigh the same exact weight. They're going the same exact, everything about them is identical. And they hit. What happens? It doesn't move that way, and it doesn't move that way. They both come to a perfect standstill. That's physics, by the way. So now, let's do that with water. Let's say that you have hose 1 and hose 2. Both identical width, identical water pressure, identical everything. Perfectly aligned. Water coming this way and water going that way. When those streams of water hit perfectly, so long as they're precisely aligned, when these hit, you're going to have water going this way, up, and this way, down. How do we get the water to go in all directions? If you were to add another 2 hoses, you're now going to have water going up, down, left, and right. Now gravity affects matter. Water is matter. If you were to remove gravity from the equation, then your up, down, left, and right in 3D, in a third-dimensional perspective, would create a torsion field of water. The reason why I'm giving this analogy so you guys understand is because that's exactly what this is doing, only with light. Gravity doesn't affect light, because gravity doesn't affect light because light does not matter. Water is matter. So I just use water to explain this. But when you're working in the realm of non-physical, of light, you're having everything hit perfectly, energetically speaking, to create that vortex that we call a torsion field. So on the scalar side, that's how you do it. You merge, in this case, four identical, from four separate points, identical electromagnetic fields to create a 4-point stable torsion field. And that environment will render your body healthier, not because it's healing you, but because your body syncs to the environment that it's in. If your body is in a healthy environment, I'm going to keep repeating it, you experience health. If it's in a sick, incoherent, distorted environment, you experience the opposite. So that's this side taken care of. And by the way, that scalar field from this room goes out 2.2 miles. Now let's add a different dimension for a second. It doesn't go out 2.2 miles just left and right. It goes out 2.2 miles in all directions. It's a sphere. So it's really a diameter of 4.4 miles, 2.2 miles in all directions. Down, up, left, and right. And because scalar is non-physical, walls can't impact it. Scalar fields go through the entire planet. That's why you have a torsion field all around planet Earth. It's not going around planet Earth. It's going through planet Earth. Because planet Earth, as we know it, exists as a physical planet. Scalar is beyond physicality, beyond the limitations of what we call the speed of light, the speed of perception. So scalar goes through anything and everything because it is literally vibrating faster than anything and everything. That's how it works in the world of physics. So we've established the scalar part. Right, Racer? Now that you understand the scalar field that this creates, some people would hear that and say, oh, that's great. So I could be 2 miles away from this thing and still get an impact. And that's true and not true. Because you get an impact from the scalar field. But that's not the holistic picture. The holistic picture is supposed to be an impact on both this and this. 3D is where these screens come in. So basically what these screens are doing, and I'm going to simplify it, is a three-pronged approach of what you're seeing over here. There's something called the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance, its standard is 7.83 hertz. That's like the heartbeat of Earth. When things go out of resonance of that or in ratio with it, you get mess-ups. The goal is to be in coherency, in alignment with that Schumann's resonance to the best of your ability. This is radiating, is emitting that energy of the Schumann's resonance in combination with what we call, why am I blanking? The sequence? Fibonacci, there we go. That's how you know I'm tired. Okay. So the Fibonacci sequence is pretty much a sequence of numbers. Some call it the golden mean, the golden ratio, all these things. Basically, it's a set of numbers that I don't remember off the top of my head. But those, does anybody here remember those numbers? At least the first few? No.
1
No.
plus 2 is 3. Yeah.
3 plus 2 is 5.
Yeah.
5 plus 3 is 8, right? It keeps going, it keeps adding from the number before it. And that sequence, whatever that sequence equates to, it's infinite. They call it the golden ratio, the golden mean in the Fibonacci sequence because it's a sequence that pretty much everything of creation as we know it operates according to. What do I mean by that? I mean that when a sperm and an egg come together and cells start multiplying, the multiplication of the cells goes in accordance with the Fibonacci sequence. When a flower blooms, the literal, they call it fractal mathematics, of like the ratios of the petals and this, all of those, everything in nature grows and works according to, multiplies according to the Fibonacci sequence. So it's an inherent code that's very important for life as we know it. The movement that you see on the screen, some are moving down, some are moving up, some are moving faster, and some are moving slower. Each one is moving in accordance, in and of itself, with the Fibonacci sequence in the units of seconds. So whatever that number is, 2, 5, 8, whatever that sequence is, it would go up for that many seconds and then change for that many seconds, and go up for the next amount of seconds, go down for the next amount of seconds. In terms of how often it changes, mixed in with its speed as well. So what you're looking at over here is light within the spectrum. The spectrum of what? The spectrum of reality as we know it, which is your vector, your 0 to 186,000 miles per second. So let me take it back so we don't lose anybody over here. Over here, scalar is everything faster than the speed of light. Scalar is what we call that part, the engine field generator, merging and creating your torsion field. Now we're talking about operating within the spectrum, lower than scalar, within vector, to see how can we actually impact our physical bodies. Because we have the spiritual component that of course impacts our physical bodies, but we also have organs. We have hearts and lungs and kidneys and livers and all those things that we need to take into consideration. So through the Schumann resonance, 7.83 Hz, through the Fibonacci sequence, and through what in my opinion is the most important part of these screens, which is your color, you're helping the body heal itself. Let's talk about color for a second. This range of 0 to, I'm just going to draw a light bulb, is basically our perception as we know it. It starts here and it ends here. In terms of color, we call that, on the spectrum of nanometers, 360 to 720 nanometers. What is that? That's your red, to your orange, to your yellow, to your green, to your blue, to your indigo, to your violet. The difference between red and purple is a wavelength. It's an energy. That's what color really is. So using color can be very, very beneficial to helping the body heal itself if you know how to use color the right way. What is the prime function of DNA? It's the storage of photons. Photons is another word for light. So the prime function of DNA is to store light. If you give it good light, it's very beneficial. If you give it incoherent light, it can be very counterproductive. So check this out. These are the colors in order of the rainbow. Have you guys ever seen a diagram of a person meditating with 7 chakras? And it goes red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet? That's not by chance. That's by divine order. That's by an awareness of how color actually works. So your yellow aligns with your solar plexus. And your solar plexus aligns with what in Western medicine they would call your digestive system. They would call your intestines. Your green aligns with your heart and your lungs. Green is the optimal frequency expressed as a color that those organs work on. So every organ has an optimal frequency that it works on. We just look at it as green, red, and yellow. But what it's really saying is green is a frequency. It's an optimal resonance for something specific. So if you were to try and mix green, with your throat, it's not going to work so well. Because your throat is your thyroid, your communication, your throat as a whole, which is the color blue. That's the color of communication because that's the optimal frequency of this part of the body. This part of the body is green. This part of the body is yellow and orange and red and so on and so forth. And every part, every color has a different purpose. So now we're going to connect some dots and then bring it back to this technology and how it actually works. Do you know what foods are best for your digestive system? Yellow ones. Bananas, mangoes, pineapples, lemons, all of those help with digestion. And it's not by chance. It's because there's an order to how things work. Green helps remove mucus and phlegm from your lungs. Green helps heal the heart. Green juices, that's how they work. Try going on a fast on green juices and tell me how much phlegm comes out. Because that is the part of the body that it is rebalancing by giving it the optimal frequency. Becoming that frequency again, and your body knows exactly where to send that energy to rebalance that part of the body. So when you're looking at basically the rainbow, what you're doing is having the DNA work with coherent light, because the prime function of DNA is the storage of light. This is coherent light that it gives on a spectrum. Dr. Michael calls it polychromatic therapy. Polychromatic therapy just means a lot of different colors. That's what that word basically means. And when you use light for therapy, it's just like you using the color of foods to rebalance a certain part of your body, because that's how it works. Matter of fact, if you really want to take it to the next level, you can convert songs to color. Because if a color is an energy measured in nanometers, and a song, a sound, is an energy measured in hertz, then all you need to do is convert nanometers to hertz, and you'll know this song is yellow, good for my digestive system. This song is green, good for my heart and my lungs. So I'm giving you these examples to give you a holistic picture of how everything works, because everything is interconnected to everything. And just like we said in the beginning with those 3 points, with the electrical charge, the pH, and the oxygen, everything that I'm telling you guys now is not something that's coming from memory. It's something that's coming from one point that you learn that will bring you to all other points. Because if you know what the color is, and you know how the color impacts certain parts of your bodies, then if you just think about it for long enough, and you understand how color works, then taking that leap to saying, well, song can turn into color is not far-fetched anymore. It's just the next step in your process of becoming aware as you receive the base knowledge. The way that this world works is like an interwoven web of a bunch of different things that all represent each other. And they're all interconnected to itself. It's one huge web. You start at one point, you get to every other point. You just need to understand one point holistically to understand how to connect to all other points. So let's recap for a second. You have engine field generator, which is basically using computers. And this is, if you're looking at the unit on its side, this is the black box behind it and the screen in front of it. Here's what I'm really trying to tell you guys. This is rebalancing everything in those dimensions. And this, which really looks like this, is rebalancing everything in these dimensions. And basically, through the technology, what you're doing is you're dissolving this illusion. You're creating one holistic dimension of balance and health once again. So this technology is taking both the scalar and the vector, both the 5D and the 3D, and merging dimensions to take care of us on all sides. But it's not taking care of us per se. It's giving us the proper environment in both the tangible world and the intangible world to allow the body and the soul. Some people, when they hear soul, go crazy on me, so we're going to use the definition with soul of energy and information. That's what it is. So the intangible and the tangible merge to create true holistic health, instead of just focusing on the illusion of what you think you are, which is a physical body. All disease in this world doesn't start as a physical thing. All disease in this world starts with a spiritual root, which we can call emotions, feelings, things like that. You can actually see who's on their path to getting cancer just by reading an email and how they speak. Try and see those people from the emotional standpoint, and you'll see who's going into a distorted field of getting angry and triggered all the time, or who's coming from a perspective of understanding what's going on. Meaning, the true difference between health and disease is your awareness. And this helps us rebalance and come back into balance so we can dive back into that awareness within us, not outside of us. It's a change of perception, a change of consciousness, a change of awareness that will change the world. Not getting rid of guns. Not giving somebody $1 billion to put food on a lot of people's plates. It will solve it temporarily, but so will a pharmaceutical drug. It will solve it temporarily, but it won't solve it from the root. It will take away the symptoms, but it didn't pay attention to the base of it all. So this is all reflections of everything else. Everything's connected to everything. The way that we've been taught to think is the way that our medical system works. It's the way that everything works. We need a more holistic approach, a holistic perspective, if we want to experience holistic health. And in short, that's how this thing is working. That's how the science behind it works. It uses both scalar and vector through color, through certain sequences, through certain hertz, like the Schumann resonance, to rebalance the body and beyond, because that's exactly what we are. So I'm going to pause it on that, because there may be some questions, but that would be my best attempt at this point, and it always refines and gets better and better. But my best attempt in trying to explain what this thing is on a scientific level, both physically and spiritually, yes.
So if you're looking at the vector, the 3D side, does it matter how much skin is exposed? I get asked that all the time.
Yeah. So some people probably also ask you if you need your eyes open or staring at it, right? Yeah. So let's put it like this. When you're in the sun, right, you're walking around. Let's start with the eyes for a second. Do you need your eyes open to get vitamin D? The answer is no. If you cover yourself completely, you'll still get vitamin D because you can't actually cover yourself. There's still light and rays and things like that going through. It may be diminished, but the level that we're talking about over here is so minute and it's irrelevant. Because light is like water. It seeps through every single crack. Light is even more refined than water. So if you're like this and you're getting it here, people think like that because they think, okay, your arm is separate, is not your leg. But your arm is your leg. That's why if I inject something here, it's going to affect your big toe. Because it's a united system. So in short, so long as they're not in a hazmat suit, you're good. That's the simple answer. Because you're dealing with light. It's refined photons that are smaller than what we can even comprehend. It will go through anything. Cool. Now's the time for questions. If you guys want to go into that, and then we can just drift off and keep
Can
going.
these be worn outside your shirt, or inside your shirt as well to be active? They can be hidden.
It doesn't need to be on your skin. What these do you have these in the front here? Okay, so these are medallions, and you have bracelets as well. And these are bracelets. These are basically not something that they created, the Earth created this. And EES basically takes these and hypercharges these products, these stones, with this technology. Now I get the question by skeptics a lot, and I always go to the skeptics on purpose, because I don't like preaching to the choir. We need to answer the hard questions so we get past those things. So the skeptics always say, what do you mean? It's a stone. You can't do anything with a stone. And then what I bring to them is, well, that's how your iPhone works. Your iPhone literally can store memory through quartz, through stone. That's how the stone has been shown in many, many ways to literally store terabytes of information on a tiny little piece. There is memory to stone. There is an energy to stone. Stones have a lot of capabilities beyond just this thing that you hold in your hand. So they took a stone and they embedded the energy of specifically scalar. You don't get this part with the stone. You get this part with the color of the stone specifically. Like this, for example, is closest to red. This is closest to your 360 nanometer side of the spectrum. So it's good for grounding. That's what tiger's eye is. Lapis lazuli would be more for communication. It's your blue. Amethyst would be more for your crown, and so on and so forth. So basically, it doesn't need to touch you the way that these things work, because they create a cocoon of that scalar that's embedded within it through what this technology already created. My recommendation would be clean it often, charge it under a full moon. For anybody, also, I always go to the skeptics with the moon. They're like, what do you mean? The moon can't do anything. The moon is the reason why coral reefs reproduce every single month at a full moon. No matter how deep that coral reef is, not even reaching the light of the moon. The moon is powerful. The moon is literally huge in terms of its impact on us as a whole. During a full moon, there's a reason why people call it a lunatic, because it's impacted by the energy of the moon. People can be impacted by that. People's libido grows during the full moon. Animals have sex on a full moon. It's like it's a thing. Menstrual cycles are supposed to be according to a moon cycle. So that's why I say charge it under the full moon, because there's a lot of energy that you can gain through that. But in short, it creates a 5.5-foot cocoon around your body, so-called, but I do that on purpose because it's not protecting you from anything. The way scalar works is not by creating a field to protect you from something bad. Scalar simply takes negative energy and transmutes it into positive energy. So there's a paradigm shift in the way that we think about it then. Instead of saying I need to be protected from this thing, it's saying I'm going to transmute everything that comes my way. That's how it really works. But of course, these are nowhere nearly as strong as something like that. This, Dr. Michael would call the high-tech and the low-tech model, basically, like a stone. But it's its own form of technology.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It's really, I get it. Which I'm glad I get it. So I have a diagnosis of spinal stenosis or something. I have 2 discs that are out of place. What would be a time frame that would take for something like that to have my body heal itself?
Whenever your body is ready. That's the truth.
I mean, is it possible? I'm gonna say.
Everything's possible.
Right, well, intellectually I get that.
Yes, yes. So I'll break it down. First of all, okay, so I'm gonna speak about a few things here with that, because that's a good question. We've been programmed, because of the medical industry, to be used to people telling us 80% good. 80% of the time this pill will do this to you. If you do this, you'll experience that. If you do that, you'll experience this, and so on and so forth. So one of the questions that I get from center owners all the time, because they need to answer their people appropriately, is somebody's coming in with X, whatever, and they want to know how many hours they should spend in it to see an impact. And the true answer is nobody actually knows, because your body is different than mine. The other answer is, if we have enough data, we'll be able to give you statistics of people in your situation and what they've done and the improvements that they've seen over time by doing X, Y, and Z. The way the medical industry works is, again, through scientific studies. It costs about $250 million just for an application. Then you have clinical trials, clinical studies, and through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, like $10 billion later, you can legally say that this is good for this, scientifically proven. That's what scientifically proven really means. So we need to find a way to answer your question in the same way that they've answered their questions, without the billions of dollars, because that's when you get into a lot of dirty waters, and in a legal way. So what we did, and this is going to be a process, this isn't going to happen overnight, but what we did was create something called the Conditions Improvement Form. Up until now, we've been using testimonials, right? People sharing their stories over video, over text, things like that. That may be good for all of us in this room, but if we want to reach billions of people, if we want to show people impacts for real, we need to speak to them in their language. We need to speak to them from their level. What is the level of the common person? The level of the common person is truly, the common man doesn't care about how scalar works. They care about, is this going to help me or not? And I get it, because most people want to feed their families and focus on that, and they don't have time for the science right now. So through the Conditions Improvement Form, which maybe you can also fill out with everybody else in this room over time, is a form that asks specific questions to gather certain data points so we can express something in the same way the medical industry does, only legally reported by the people, without spending billions of dollars, because we don't have them. So this form basically says, what are you dealing with? What's your ailment? How chronic is it? How long have you been dealing with it? What size unit are you using? In this case, a 24-unit system. How many hours were you in it for? And what improvement from 1 to 10 did you experience after X amount of time? Now let's say 1,000 people in your situation filled that out. The next time somebody like you comes in and says, how many hours do I need for this specific condition? The answer would be, we can't tell you 100%. But based on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people of the sample size that we have, 77% of women between the age of X and Y, between the age of 30 and 60, experienced an improvement of 7 out of 10 points after spending 6 hours in a 24-unit system. And the more people we have filling that out, the more data we'll be able to graph to show how this actually works. Now the beauty of that is we can't make medical claims. And I'm not interested in making medical claims either, because then you have to deal with the FDA, which is a whole mafia in and of itself. So we're not interested in that. The conclusion that this brings us to is the people are saying it. We just created a system to graph what the people are saying. So it expresses it in the same way that the medical industry expresses things, only the background of the corruption that you need to get to that point generally is out of the picture. The confirmation bias is out of the picture, because you're not dealing with 3 people putting together a study, you're dealing with tens of thousands that are inputting the data themselves in their own way. So in short, the answer is number 1, this can definitely help you. How soon? I'm not sure. I don't know anybody in your specific situation, so I don't even know what to base it off of. But I'm also only one person that's only heard so many stories. So my recommendation to you would be experience 20. I like a 20-hour base. Do 20 hours, do a test before, whatever test that would be in your situation, do a test after, and see what happens. But it's not enough just to sit in the chair. Holistic health. Holistic health means, yes, this can help you rebalance the environment, but the next question is, what actions are you taking? How are you eating? How calm are you? Where are your stress levels? Are you doing things like meditation, maybe do things like journaling to just help you calm down? Because stress ultimately is the number 1 killer of absolutely everything. It's where pain comes from. So if you can calm that down, and stress is an energy, by the way, if you can calm that down and mix it with this, then you're now, it takes 2 to tango. It takes the environment, but it also takes the human body and the actions of the human to do its best to sync with that environment as well. So this will have an impact on you objectively regardless. If you want to have the highest probability of success in your situation, I would say take care of everything on all situations. So that means what we already said, another 2 things. Number 1, salt baths. Do you have salt here? Salt baths to help get rid of what the body is trying to extract. Almost like if you were to cough up all that phlegm, are you going to swallow it or are you going to spit it out? The salt bath is the equivalent of your body spitting out what it's coughing up, only through your skin and so on and so forth. The other really important part is eating. Food is very, very important. Now, I'm going to the whiteboard because I want to draw something for you guys to understand what, for whatever reason, is very controversial, but we're going to make it very simple. One of the main things that Dr. Michael has said in her protocol, and one of the main things that I speak about as well, is a specific type of eating. Now, let me just get a few things out of the way. I was born and raised a vegan. Does that mean that it's right for everybody? No. There are people that try and do that. It doesn't make them feel good. They feel weak. It's not good. They go back to eating meat and they feel great. Honor that. Listen to your body. That's very, very important. But regardless of any of those things, there are certain sciences of how energy and light moves to understand what food may be most beneficial for you in a specific situation. Almost like fasting. Fasting is not something you do for your whole life. Fasting is something you do in spurts when you're trying to get through things or detox from things and so on and so forth. So you can look at a certain diet for a period of time. Dr. Michael will say if you're experiencing a lot of dis-ease or ailments in your body and you're really in a severe situation, not so much in your case, we're talking about, high stages of cancers, things like that, but I want to speak about this because it's important, is go on a plant-based vegan diet. Anytime her or I say that, I'm always faced with one question. Isn't that what the evil people are telling us to do? That's what, they're always like, they're trying to make us eat bugs and Beyond Burgers and things like that. So there's a very big difference when you understand the true food pyramid of energy and how it works. So here's how it works. Everything and the sustenance of anything physical is based on light, the sun. All life as we know it on this planet and beyond, to our knowledge at least, is based on light, because light is the source of all. Light turns into something physical, which gives us energy to give us sustenance. The true energy pyramid of food is not what they taught us in school in FDA. But it's a but it's a 4-level base that starts from the center. Okay. So what you're looking at here is the real food pyramid, the real pyramid of energy and how it works. Everything comes back to source, light as we know it. Light is the closest thing to source in our physical world that gives us sustenance. But although we can gather minerals and nutrients to an extent, for the most of us, because there are very advanced people that can do some things, that most of us are not there. So we're going to speak about the collective right now. Most people, yeah, we sit in the sun and we do get nutrients and things like that, but not enough to not drink water and food, not yet at least. We're still physical vessels. So there's 2 different types of beings out there, on this planet at least. And that's a heterotroph and an autotroph. An autotroph are things that make their own food. A heterotroph are things that need to eat things to get their own energy. We are heterotrophs. We need to eat things to gain that sustenance holistically. But fruits, vegetables, plants, nutrients, nuts, and herbs are level 1 on your pyramid closest to source. They're autotrophs. Through photosynthesis and beyond, they make their own energy directly by transmuting this into what they can sustain themselves on. Then we have herbivores. Herbivores eat fruits, vegetables, plants, nuts, and herbs because they're herbivores. And they get their energy from this level, which got its energy from this level. Then you get carnivores, which is level 3, which eats the herbivore, which got its energy from level 1, which got its energy from the sun. So your carnivores are 3rd level of dilution away from light. Your herbivores are 2nd level of dilution away from light. Your autotrophs, level 1, is your 1st level directly connected to light. And then your last one is your processed foods. Your processed food, we can call level 4. I can't draw them on because they don't eat carnivores or herbivores or plants. What your processed foods are is what the evil people have disguised as level 1 while being level 4. So your Beyond Meat and your Impossible Meat and your Doritos and your Lay's chips and all that is not plant-based. It could be, it's technically, legally, it's plant-based on the bag because it's based on plants, but it's not plants. It's 2 different things. So this is what I'm talking about when we're talking about a true whole food vegan diet. It's not plant-based food that comes out of a bag, especially when you're sick. Don't get me wrong, there are times where I have, just now, I was eating some dip with crackers. Crackers fall through. So does that mean that we have to turn to Buddhas and only eat from up here? No, enjoy yourself. God bless you, have a good time. It tastes good. But be aware of this and have a good ratio. You know, have like a 90-10 ratio. Eat your junk sometimes because we desire it and we like it, but do it all in balance. That's all I'm trying to say here. So, and in a way, the junk foods also, if they give you happiness, it's a great thing. It's a great, great thing. Because happiness is a great emotion. It makes me really happy when something good comes into my mouth that tastes great. But within reason. You know, we all have to balance everything is what I'm trying to say. So basically, All of these things are connected to source. The only difference between them is some are further dilutions than others. There's no such thing that's not connected to source. There's no such thing that doesn't come from nature, because nature is all there is. There's no such thing that doesn't come from God, because there's no God and. Everything is God, however you want to define that word. It's a tricky, triggering word sometimes. So with this, even look at buildings in New York City. Look at this building. This building is made out of sheetrock and cement and wood. This sheetrock still comes from natural elements. We just took natural elements and manipulated it in a way, processed it in a way to create sheetrock. That's what your Dorito is. It's taking nature and elements and manipulating it in a way to create something that we call food that gives you cancer. And that's pretty much what's going on here. So this is not in alignment with these eras. This is just its own thing that stands for manipulation of nature as we know. Everything is connected to source. The question is, what are you eating and how close is that to the light that you're trying to achieve? Especially if you're sick, especially if you're trying to regain and reclaim that health once again, this is your answer right here. Go as close as you can to it, at least for a period of time, to get back to it. And who knows, maybe that will be good for you and you'll stick there. If you don't, see what's good for you, see what feels good. That's why I say there are some people that they hear about this and they're at level 3 or 2, right? Or, I'm sorry, level 3. Which is, by the way, most of the human population, okay? And they hear this and they're like, oh my God, this is horrible, I need to go right here. But that's not good either. Because if your body is in a specific resonance, is in a specific vibration for a long period of time, and you try and change it right away, you could have a really big problem. If you're addicted to cocaine, and you try and drop off right away, it can kill you. Same thing with alcohol. Same thing with any substance out there. Why? Because the human being, let's say, and I'm going to take drugs for example, not comparing the two, but I'm going to take drugs to really make it apparent. The human being that's addicted to that cocaine, let's say, why are they addicted to it? Why do they like it? Because the resonance of that substance, the vibration of that substance, and the vibration of their being is either in alignment or the vibration of their being is below that of the vibration of the cocaine. So when they take the cocaine, it makes them feel good. Because you are what you consume. So if you consume something and it makes you feel good, then that thing is above you. Because it's raising you up. It makes you feel good. It gives you that great feeling. I'm speaking strictly energetically speaking right now. So if you were just to go and say, okay, I'm out. Well, you need a gradual process sometimes to do something like that. If I were to go and eat meat today, I wouldn't be able to digest it. You guys would, for those of you who eat it. So it's not about good or bad. That's not what I'm talking about here. It's just understanding energy and how it works. And understanding a progression of moving towards what you want to be. It's all about your vibration of being. If you shift that vibration of being too quick, you can hurt yourself. Now for some, too quick can be 1 week. For others, too quick can be 1 year. For others, too quick can be 8 years. Everybody has their own thing, which is why when somebody tells me, I tried going vegan and I didn't feel well, don't do it that quick. Just don't do it. Enjoy where you're at, and if you even want to go in that direction, listen to your body. Because you can hurt yourself as well if you move too quickly. So that's my lesson on food. That's it. But now you just activated that. I wanted to bring that up.
That's fine, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Do we know how the system affects any kind of implants in the body from, mesh or metal implants or even silicone or anything like that?
If anything, the body's always trying to come back to its state, right? So if anything, and I've never seen this happen, but if I had to assume big picture, if anything could happen, by the way, Dr. Michael has never seen anything like that happen on like contraindications with things inside the body that were implanted. But if anything, it would try pushing those things out because it doesn't understand those things. But if it's pushing those things out, it means that it's coming back to its natural state of what that thing was trying to supplement in the first place.
Would be a heart valve, so.
I've never heard of any contraindications with like pacemakers or anything like that, ever. I guess over time, we'll be able to see more, but I don't see how something like that can happen with a torsion field. It just doesn't make sense. Because if anything, it would rebalance where you're at. The body's not stupid. It's not gonna do something to hurt itself. It will do something to help itself. I don't see contraindications coming from pacemakers. Dr. Michael will say there are none whatsoever, because in her I've only been doing this for a year. In her 27 years of doing this, she's never heard of anything like that. So I go on her for that one.
Right, so for something like that, like breast implants or something, the body's gonna be looking to.
Never saw anything, again, I'm saying if anything,
Yeah.
I could see it pushing something out to help, but we've never seen that. No, not yet at least. Yes.
How is the effectiveness of the energy affected by smaller units and also tabletop units where you don't have four corners?
So the difference between a cube and this is a cube doesn't have the light hitting itself. You still have the merge of the electromagnetic field. So you got the torsion field. You have the light itself fountaining out. Remember we spoke about the electrical charge? So you get that electrical charge by light imploding upon itself. So that is perfectly aligned to that with a laser to like the precision of 1/100th of an inch. It's like perfect precision. When the light hits itself, hits each other, it creates an implosion, which creates a charge. That's your 70 to 90 millivolts. And when you create that charge, you are now sitting in an environment that's charged at 70 to 90 millivolts, which your body will then charge through. Because if you're at 20 and you're around something that's 70, it's going to start picking you up and charging you. If you're at 70 and it's at 70, it will maintain you and keep you optimal, and so on and so forth. The difference between this and a cube is a cube doesn't have, they call it photonic collision of light, basically. It doesn't have that because the screens aren't facing each other, the screens are facing out. So the biggest difference between the two biggest difference between this and that is number one, the cubes are not nearly as strong as something like this. And the photonic collision does not exist in the cube itself. So you don't get that charge effect. But you do get the torsion field, you do get the polychromatic light, you just get it on a lower effect because on this, pay attention, you have this screen that's different than this, that's different than this, and so on and so forth. So you have a wider range of colors that you can actually cover within the spectrum of light that we experience. On a cube, you have 4 screens and all screens need to be the same. So there's only 1 code of light that you can actually embed into a cube as opposed to 6 codes of light that you can embed into a 24-unit system. Yes?
So the difference, your pleasure, number one, I say, what a pleasure, what a beautiful being. But,
Thank you.
and pleasure. So what is the difference? Because I've been to centers and seen friends opening ones. Now they're talking from 24 to 12 in New York City and a doctor's office to now 36.
And 48s?
Right. And now we're talking bringing them up around,
Yeah.
off the ground. So that's one, what are the differences within that? And as well as, there's so many varying opinions on the detox bath. And.
Like what?
One center didn't even tell me about that. And then another center has a certain recipe that's not the recipe from Sanders. And it's not to talk negatively.
No, of course.
But it really feels like it would be really wonderful to understand its profound, integration that really helps a person after the session. And the borax is always that I've seen people get a little bit nervous about. So those are just a couple of things that I love clarity because I think it's helpful.
Borax is just a mineral. They get concerned about it because they associate it with laundry. That's why. To be just to be super straight with that, It's when somebody's speaking about something that we don't know about, the first thing is we get concerned, because like, what's that? Especially when it's associated with something that you clean your clothes with. But it's just a mineral. That's all that is. So in short, let me try to remember the order. Okay, of your questions. So number one, there is no difference between if you set it up this way or if you set it up on top of shelves. In terms of, like, it's creating the same field in a different formation. The point is, how do we create a field? We need proper formations to do it. So generally, some of the people that put it up there could be because of their space. Could be because they're having, let's say, autistic children come in and they run around and they don't want them to bump into it. Things like that. So they'll put it up. But it's not about, like, scientifically speaking, it's not more or less strong than this. If you have a 24 unit like this or a 24 unit on shelves, I like this better because there's less room for error. On a shelf, those things are not like this over here is on a rack, and all of them are perfectly aligned. So over here, you technically have 4 spots for error if somebody hits. Over there, if I hit a shelf, if there's an earthquake, if there's vibration in the building, whatever it may be, over time it can move that and take it out of alignment. Over here it's much harder because it's much, much heavier. So I like how this is situated a whole lot better. In terms of sizes, and I'm going to be careful with how I say this, it's not about better or worse, it's just about stronger. When I say stronger, some people hear that and they hear better. And I don't want it to come across that way. So there have been incredible things in 12 units, incredible stories coming out of 8s and 12s. There have been incredible stories coming out of 24s. Me personally, I would go to the 24. Because the 24, it's stronger. And again, I don't want to call it better because it's all dependent on what you're looking to do and how you're looking to do it. Let's put it this way. A 24 is not going to hurt you or be dangerous as opposed to a 12. It's just going to be a stronger field. But there have been clinical studies that have been done on this technology with 8 units that have shown, I think it was a 10-year-old girl with multiple grand mal seizures happening a day to 0. And that's with an 8. So it's like, that's why I'm always careful with how I cover them. But personally, I like the 24 better, not just because it's stronger, but because the way that Dr. Michael explains it is with the number of screens and something to do with the numerology of how this is actually situated, it will actually interact with your DNA better than a 12. So, but a 36 is not the same as the 24 on that specific point. It's the number 24 that has to do with the structure of your DNA that will help return it to what you would call its original divine matrix a whole lot quicker. So it's a gray area. That's why I don't want to say it's better or worse, but scientifically speaking, it is strong. You were the last part of your question that you asked me.
It was about the baths and the
Yes.
importance of them.
Okay.
Or not.
So I've learned that it's very hard to get 260 individuals to do the same thing. It's difficult. Have you ever tried like watching a movie on Netflix with 4 people and you can't choose one? Now imagine doing that with 260. It's crazy. So basically we have our recommendations. We have our formula that was written by Dr. Michael that we've shared with all centers with the borax and the right way according to her of the formula of how to do it. To be honest, not everybody will do that whole thing because you're dealing with so many people and everybody has their own thing of how they do it. Some people may have not even seen the 8 emails that we've sent. You know what I'm saying? Because they're dealing with so many things that are going on. So I think over time, like through speaking engagements like this, and just continuing to just hammer that in, at the very minimum, every center over time will remind everybody, do your salt bath after a session. No matter how short or how long, do the salt bath. But again, we're 11 months in to something that has never been done before. So it's a process. It's a process, and over time, I think it will balance itself.
So we should all take a salt bath.
Yeah. Oh, that's
I definitely recommend it. Do you have the formula here?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can get that formula directly from the center.
They're amazing.
It's great. It feels amazing.
I just want to make a
Yes.
suggestion, maybe putting the formula
on the UNIFYD Healing site?
Oh, it's there.
Oh, it is. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, you see, it's, because we're dealing with a lot of people. So everybody, like even if we let people know, take it like this, you send 200,000 emails out. Out of the 200,000 emails, 50% of the people open it. Out of the 50% that people open it, maybe 50% of them read it. And out of the 50% who read it, there are about 3 links there. And then each link has a click-through rate, and one of those links are your formula. So you just went from 200,000 to about 20 if you're lucky.
It'll actually have a part of the course, part of the kit, is part of the maybe,
Oh, it is too.
Oh.
It is too. So
So, yes.
we have a lot of things that are part of the kit. So naturally, if you're opening up a center, you're so busy. How busy were you when you were, bringing this into here and doing all that? Kathy was one of the
She was
first,
good though about giving the recipe because I didn't hear it.
but she's different, not to play favorites, but she's very good at what she does.
Yes.
She's very good at what she does. From the beginning, you see a woman that knows how to run a business, how to run an operation, how to do it the right way. So it's easier to work with people like Kathy as opposed to somebody that may have never done anything like this before, where it's not, to speak negatively about them, it's just their first rodeo. It's not her first rodeo. So she knows how to do it a little bit better than the person that's starting something for the first time. So, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So, I know you were talking as far as how each system talks to each other in terms of the alignment. Are these calibrated every couple of months by the company to make sure that they're still in alignment?
Did they give you the calibration kit? Do you know? They did. So when they come install it, they give a calibration kit so they can actually, center owners can check themselves with the calibration. Over here, honestly, it's not going to go out. Like with the setup, it's not on a second floor. If it was on the second floor, you have more vibration in the floor and all that. It's not on the second floor. It's not in a place where you have earthquakes. Unless somebody comes and taps into it, and even then, it's hard to.
Yeah, this is all taken down too with gaps.
Yeah. So.
Jeremiah put this.
Awesome. So yeah, they would recommend checking it every few months, but it's hard to take it out of it. It's not a simple thing to do unless it's all on shelves in their own units. That's why I like this way better than the other way.
Can this actually change DNA? Like if somebody with a genetic disorder, say muscular dystrophy or Huntington's, will it actually help that heal, or just?
I like that you bring that up. Okay, we need to come back here. Okay, first let me answer your question in short. Just a second. Okay. We're going to do 2 more questions after this one, but this is important. Okay. All right, so we're going to get to that in just a second. The short answer is yes, it can. But there are more factors than just coming physically and doing something over here, because there's the physical path that you're on. And then there's a karmic cycle that we all have. I'm going to go into the spiritual realm for a second. In your karmic cycle, whatever you came here, chose to experience in order to help you reach your next step in your evolution, or whatever you want to call that, there are certain things that you actually came here to experience. And generally those things are not easy things to deal with. They're what some people call tests, but what they really are gifts. So I'm pretty much sitting here telling you that the toughest things in your life are coming to help you do something, to help you realize something, to help you rectify something, to help you come back onto your path beyond just this life. So how could it be that a person would ever choose to experience a genetic disorder? Choose to experience something that no person in their right mind would ever want to experience? And the answer is because there's a difference between free will and divine will. Other words for this are your ego. For lack of a better term, we're going to use the word soul. Physical, intangible. There are certain things that, yes, in your body you may want to get out of, but you've chosen certain circumstances when coming into that body with that specific thing. It didn't happen by chance. Nothing happens by chance. There's cause and effect. And everything has some form of divine order in this world, one way or another, whether we understand it or not. If all is one, we understand that when you go beyond the speed of light, and you understand the spiritual truths of creation, there is no duality, there is no good and bad, there is no health and disease. There is one unit, there is one core, there is one essence. So if all is one, if all comes from Source, would Source ever do anything to hurt itself? And the answer is no. So how can we justify or make some form of understanding with, a child that comes in with a disability? Born with it. Forget about something that happens when you're 20, 25, 30. Born with it. How can we justify even something that happens down the line? You form some form of cancer or disease or whatever it may be. And the simplest way that I found to understand it, which still triggers some people, but it is what it is through differentiating between free will and divine will. Free will is what you want to experience. Divine will is what you need to experience. Two completely different things. The point is to align if somebody ever at this point asks me, what do you think the purpose of life is? It's a very multifaceted answer, but if I had to break it down, I would say aligning free will with divine will. Divine will is why you came here in the first place. The purpose that you came here to fulfill. Free will is what happens when you come into this body and you have this veil of amnesia. You forget the divine will. And then we come here to find our purpose. You already know your purpose, but you come here to so-called find it, because that's part of the human experience. And through finding your purpose, through free will, we may experience things along the way. The hardest things that we experience, your genetic disorders, your diseases, all of these things, what if I told you we're there to actually help you? I'm going to paint a picture to show you how we can make sense of that. You know those cars with 2 steering wheels? When you're learning how to drive? We're learning how to live. There's 2 steering wheels. There's you in the car of life, driving in the free will driver's seat. And there's you in the car of life, driving in the divine will driver's seat. When you come into this life, there's that divider, like they did with COVID, but it's black, you can't see through it. And you're driving this free will driver's seat, and you're doing things along the way, and you're figuring out, through trial and error, what's good, what's not good for me, and so on and so forth. You're going through this school of education. You're learning how to live your life in the best way possible. Now, your divine will knows exactly where you're headed and where you need to go. Not with the details along the way, because that would take free will away, but with the general direction of the purpose of what you are here to do. But you forgot that. So in free will, you're driving and you start veering left. You're veering off path, and there's about to be a tree that you're going to hit. That you may not be able to see, but divine will does. So what does it do? Just like if you were divine will in that car, you would flip the car right back onto path. What happens when you veer off path and you need to come right back on it? The further you veer off, the harder you need to jerk it back onto the street, and the harder your head is going to hit that window. Now, from the awareness of free will, we say, damn, why did that happen? That hurt? That's not fair. I just hit my head on the window. But from the awareness of divine will, you understand that that window hit was a gift, because if it weren't for that, you would have hit that tree, and it would have been a whole lot crazier. Everything that we experience in life is here to help us. It's here for us. All the way to the hardest experiences that we experience. And sometimes, no matter what you want to do with trying to reverse a genetic disorder, if you haven't learned the lesson of what that thing came to teach you, which is the very gift of divine will and what it's trying to hand you, you can sit in here all you want, it's not going to help you. Because you need to deal with that part as well. This doesn't take lessons away from you. Nothing does. You can have the illusion of taking lessons away from you, but you will not pass the test. You will not pass the test and move forward to the next part of life, in this life or the next, unless you learn the lesson that it's trying to teach you. So the point is, again, to align free will with divine will. And anytime we veer off track, we have that expressed as hardships in our lives. Those hardships you could deal with in two ways. Why is this happening to me? I'm a victim to it. Or try sitting in this seat for a second and ask yourself, why is this the expression of jerking myself back on the road? Where did I go that I need to come back to? What is the lesson here? And the second you learn the lesson, you pass the test. And the second you pass the test, you receive the gift that I was trying to give you. And the second you receive the gift, you'll never need to be given that gift over again. Because once I give you a gift, I'm not going to give you the same gift again. Everything that happens in this world is both the physical and the spiritual. So part of the equation of what you're asking is why I said, yes, of course it can help. But you simultaneously need to do the spiritual work as well. You have to ask yourself, not why is this happening to me, but what is the lesson that it can teach me? What is the lesson that it's trying to show me? Not lesson because it's a punishment, lesson because it's a gift. When you graduate from 5th to 6th grade, when you go from middle school to high school, when you go from high school to college, when you go from college into the real world, you're given a test. And that test isn't a bad thing. Maybe it is in our education system today. But that test isn't a bad thing in principle. That test is meant to help you move on to the next part, to continue graduating. So I bring that up because it's extremely important when dealing with healing parts of your life. It's not just about being here. It goes to what you were expressing with yourself in your own life. That's a veer off the road. It happened to me when I dislocated my shoulder and almost lost my leg from a staph infection. That's a veer off the road. And it's a jerking back onto the road. Because this thing is always trying to help you. And sometimes it helps you in ways that you don't understand until you understand this lesson. So the last thing that I'll say before going to the next point, to the next question, is ego and soul. A lot of people in the spiritual community say the ego has to die and it's a bad thing. No, the ego is a great thing if you know how to use it. The ego is your engine that propels you through this physical life. The ego is the thing that thinks through the body. Free will. The ego is the thing that says, I don't want cancer and I would like to experience health, right? The soul has a much larger understanding of the contrast that you came here to experience. And if you're here to rectify something or learn something, it will give you the lessons to learn them. And it's not a bad thing because Source will never do anything to hurt itself. It's up to us through the lens of free will, if we change our perception, to understand how it's actually trying to help us, as opposed to playing victim and forgetting this driver's seat exists. When you align free will with divine will, you experience greatness. When you align the desire of the ego with the desire of the soul, you experience greatness. The ego is the reason why there are 265 centers around the world today. Because if I just operated from the level of the soul, then nothing really matters. There's no need to drive and have ambition and have motivation. There's no need to run away from the bear that's about to eat you, because death doesn't exist on this level. So let's just sit there and be eaten. The ego is what keeps you alive in times of danger, because the ego believes that death of the body is death of it, because it is. So when you understand how the ego works, then suddenly it turns from your master into your slave, your servant. It starts serving you instead of you serving it. If you want to align the ego and the soul perfectly, again, everything that you do in this life is the ego acting through itself, and is the soul trying to act through the ego. Is divine will trying to act through free will. How do we align it to the best of our ability? Every time you make your next move, just ask yourself, is this coming out of the desire of my ego? And if it is this action that I'm about to take aligned with what I believe my purpose here is on this planet? And if it is, you can't fail. Because now you got angels on both this plane and that plane helping you. You got engines in both sides pushing you through. That's why we did something that was never done before. Because unified healing, these 260 something centers around the world, is an expression of that alignment. And not my alignment. I'm not talking about me here. I'm talking about the alignment of all of us. I'm talking about the alignment of the person who chose to experience this technology. I'm talking about the alignment of people like Kathy who chose to open it. I'm talking about the alignment of Dr. Sandra Rose Michael and myself who chose to do this. It takes everybody in this sphere to do this. It takes everybody to make this happen. We all have to align ourselves with everything. And when you do, when you align yourself with that highest will to the best of your ability, because that highest will changes too. When you align yourself with that highest will, with the divine will, through the engine that you've been given to move through this life physically, then you'll do things that were never done before. You make the impossible possible. That's the power of aligning the two. So now, to answer your question in 10 seconds, the answer is yes. But if that experience within that individual is trying to teach them something and they have not yet learned the lesson, you can sit in here all you want. It's not going to change you, because that would be a disservice to you. Because it would take away the obstacle that came here to show you something. It would be fighting your battles for you. That's not what God does. That's not what Source does. Awesome.
Isn't that the reincarnation, the reason that we need to learn?
That's what they call karma. In Hebrew, they call it tikkun. Tikkun is a word for rectification. You come here to rectify, to keep moving forward. So again, that, depending on who you're speaking to, that can be a controversial thing. Anybody who tells me that reincarnation doesn't exist, then I ask them, does the law of conservation exist? And they can't say no to that one. So if energy can't be created or destroyed, then what do you mean you weren't here before? You just contradicted yourself. Yes?
I have one quick question,
Yes.
but a longer comment. And my quick question is this. You had mentioned that the effect of the energy system goes out in the field about 2 point something
2.2
miles
miles.
beyond that. As it goes out, does it dissipate somewhat in its strength? Or, for example, is in the middle of this room right now with the energy field on, is that stronger than, let's say, at the 2 mile level from this room?
Yes and no. It depends what field you're speaking on. So physically speaking, technically the center of this room is the eye of the storm.
Right.
Right? That's the center of your torsion field. So right around the center, if you want to get technical, right around the center is where that's all moving. The very, very center, although that center is not a foot wide. That center is infinitesimally, whatever that word is, small. Okay? So basically that's why it's tiny. So that's why when you're standing in the center itself, which is right there, I believe, when you're standing in the center itself, you're getting the center itself of that energy. But again, physically speaking, so long as you're in that field, you're still going to get the same effects. Technically, you could say the center is the strongest on a technicality. But if you're standing there or there, it's not, if that was going to help you go into remission with your cancer, it's going to help you there or there. It's not going to be like, ooh, because I was standing there, it's not going to help you. You know what I'm saying? It's a technicality, which is true. But it's not one I would personally pay too much attention to, because the difference isn't huge. So you could be anywhere in this room. What that caused, by the way, that lack of awareness caused for everybody to go to all these centers around the world and say, I want to be in the center. If I'm in the center. It's just a lack of.
I was just thinking the price of real estate might be going up in this area. It might be a very desirable place to live, which warrants a study in this whole area, the effect of people.
The technology has shown to lower crime rates.
And my
Yes.
comment is this, I'm absolutely blown away by the information here. I'm 70 years old, I'm retired now, I've gone to thousands of workshops, sessions, and everything else. Everything you said, I'm a unified member as well.
Thank you.
It's a plug for being a unified member. You didn't plant me here.
Oh, yeah.
In the middle. But I am blown away. You are truly to feed your ego. You are truly a good teacher. You have a wealth of information. You are guided by the divine. And exactly, you are doing your divine will freely, and I am so grateful to have heard you today. I really see your heart, I see where you're coming from, and you're making the world a much, much better place to live in. And I only wish that all of your efforts will expand at an exponential level through the universe. And I would like to see more of TLS in some of the unified stuff that you've been doing.
Sure.
And I just can't even believe what you've done in the past 2 years. My mother's birthday was May 5th. She's not with me now, but when you said that, I'm just thinking of everything. And namaste.
Thank
With
you.
much gratitude.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to do one last question right there, and then I do need to speed out of here.
Just a real quick question.
Yes.
With the salt bath, is it just as effective if we do it like the foot soak bath, or does it have to be like top?
It's not as effective. The minimum you should do is your feet. It's like a good pathway of getting rid of things. If you don't have a bath at home, do that. Should be warm water to open the pores and get everything out. But if you do, I would do a salt bath over a foot bath any day. 20, 30 minutes. You can even do it for 15 minutes, get out and come back in. And do like a second round almost over a 30-minute period instead of staying 30 minutes in really hot water. So that can help you as well. All righty, so I want to say thank you to Kathy for making this happen. And remember, you can get like salt, medallions, bracelets, everything over here. If you are a Unified TV member, I don't think it applies to the products, but to sessions itself, members get 10% off. So you can find that all at unified.tv if you're not already a member over there. It's spelled UNIFYD. So check it out. We got a lot of fun stuff coming out as well, including our 1-year anniversary of Unified Healing, which is the documentary in India that we filmed coming out in a few weeks. So it's going to be cool. Yeah, it's going to be fun. Thank you guys very much for being here.